More than a decade ago, a young woman, a college student, was found strangled along the banks of the Catawba River. Now, any closure in her murder seems to be in turmoil.
The murderer of Ira Yarmolenko has not been charged and is still out there.
The man convicted of killing her all these years ago will get a second chance to prove his innocence. Did you think this moment would come? I know we talked to you while you were in. What's that?
I've been waiting.
Did you think it would happen?
Yeah, just took time.
Jurors found Mark Carver guilty of the 2008 murder.
I think I'm wrong.
But now a judge says the evidence was questionable and he deserves a new trial. The team fighting to get him released says they're now ready to prove he's not the person who committed the heinous crime.
We're going to fight it all the way up through the governor's office to make sure he's proven innocent.
But investigators say they've had the right man all along.
As I respect the judge, I think the judge is wrong.
But still, the questions remain. Did a killer just walk out of prison, or was he sent away for a crime he didn't commit?
I know I didn't do nothing. I'm innocent.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Carolinas. I'm Ken Lemon. Tonight we're digging into a case that I've been following for 11 years. From the moment University of North Carolina Charlotte student Ira Yarmolenko's body was found along the Catawba River in Mount Holly in 2008 to the moment that the man once convicted of her murder bonded out of jail. A judge ruled Mark Carver will get a new trial. And I was there to question him as he walked out of jail and into sunshine before headed home to wait for his next legal fight. Mark, what is it? How does it feel after 8 years in prison?
Feels great.
You had a long court battle. The DA says that he believes that you are his only living suspect in this case. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I know I didn't do nothing. I'm innocent.
Those first few moments,
Yeah.
when that door opened, how did you feel?
Great. Yeah.
The person who bonded you out is somebody who was exonerated, and he says he thinks that he says he wants to meet and talk with you. Do you know if you're going to speak with him for posting that $100,000 bond that got you out here?
Yeah. I talked to him.
What do you want to say to him?
I thank him. I appreciate it. He knows what I've been through.
This is a small step for you because what you really wanted was to be found innocent. The judge didn't do that. So how does it feel now getting ready for the next leg of what will be more fights in court?
Just take it one step at a time. That's all I can do, one day at a time. Yep.
Did you think this moment would come? I know we
I've
talked to
been
you while
waiting.
you were in. What's that?
I've been waiting.
Did you think it would happen?
Yeah, just took time.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
What would you like the people of North Carolina to know?
It's been hard. It's been rough. Yeah. There's a lot more out there like it. Yeah.
First thing you're gonna do. What's the first thing you're gonna do now that you're free?
Go see my grandbaby.
And that's exactly what he did. Since that moment when Carver got into a car and went home to his family, he's been spending most of his days with his granddaughter. He spoke with me weeks after his release about what gave him hope behind bars while he fought for his freedom. The man accused of a senseless murder with no apparent motive moved gingerly with a cane in one hand and his attorney's hand in the other.
Are you nervous?
Mark Carver's attorney points to this as evidence that he's innocent.
Does this seem like the Mark Carver who could go and commit this murder?
Yes, said prosecutors, they are certain that Mark Carver is the only living person responsible for the murder of Ira Yarmolenko. The body of the 20-year-old University of North Carolina Charlotte student was found in 2008 next to a car on the banks of the Catawba River in Mount Holly. Carver and his cousin Neil Cassida were fishing nearby.
I hate it happened to her, but it wasn't me and Neil.
Neil Cassida would have been tried first, but he died of a heart attack the day before his trial. Carver said Cassida died of wrongful prosecution.
It was hard on him, put a lot of stress on him, because they accused him of something he didn't do.
Carver couldn't avoid trial. He was sentenced to life in prison.
It was long, it was hard, yeah, especially when you know you didn't do nothing in there for something you didn't do.
His attorney said he was an innocent man with the IQ of a child, trapped in a place with violent offenders.
Sometimes there'd be fights and arguments and stuff. You just had to back off and let them go, you know.
Carver said he survived with help from sympathetic gang members.
Well, they knowed I was innocent and stuff, and they kind of looked out for me, yeah.
He refused to say which gangs helped, but he said he needed support. While his attorneys filed appeal after appeal for 8 years, Carver's faith in securing freedom was waning.
Sometimes I tried to give up.
He said letters to prison from family and complete strangers lifted his spirits.
Where did some of those letters come from?
Everywhere, yeah. And I had people to read it to me because I couldn't read it. They said they couldn't understand why the system failed. They couldn't understand why an innocent man was doing time for something he didn't do. Told me to hold my head up and stuff, not to give up.
Chris Muma from the North Carolina Center on Actual Innocence believes she helped the judge understand what all of Carver's supporters saw so easily.
The evidence that supports that Mark is guilty of this murder is as strong for him as it is for me.
A judge heard her arguments and awarded Mark Carver a new trial.
If not Mark, who?
Someone close to Ira, Chris Muma said. Someone who prepared to kill her.
This was a crime scene of somebody who planned ahead.
She said police and prosecutors wildly missed the mark and believes they need help finding the real killer.
I firmly believe we know more about this case than law enforcement ever knew. So hopefully somebody will ask for our opinion on that.
Carver is out on bond awaiting the next steps in the legal process. He said he put everything that happened before his release out of his mind.
How do you let something like that go?
You have to. I can't do nothing about it.
He spends his time with his 1-year-old granddaughter, born while he was in prison.
She gives me stuff, sits on my lap, talks to me and stuff. She's getting used to me.
The district attorney plans to appeal to have Carver's conviction upheld. If that doesn't happen, he says he plans to retry the case. It's a troubling scene that started with fishing for Carver and a college exam and errands for Ira. The murder of the 20-year-old shocked the community. It led to an intense investigation and rewards for information, and ultimately the arrest of Carver and his cousin, Neil Cassida, who were fishing near where her body was found. But the moments leading up to Ira's death left very little clues about what happened to the vibrant young woman. It was a seemingly normal and beautiful May day in 2008, the last day Ira Yarmolenko was seen alive. It was exam week at UNC Charlotte when Ira stepped on campus for the last time, May 5th. The 20-year-old sophomore started her day taking an exam, then spent the rest of the morning running errands. Investigators say Ira stopped at a credit union at around 10:18 a.m. Then less than 20 minutes later, at 10:33, security camera footage shows her dropping off several bags of donations at the Goodwill on University City Boulevard. It was around 10:50 when she stopped at Jackson's Java, a coffee shop where she worked near campus. Then she drove to the Catawba River, 20 miles away, where police say she was going to work on a photography project.
I think that she was looking for a pretty spot to take pictures at.
Around 1:15 p.m., two people on jet skis saw Ira's body on the banks of the river in Mount Holly near the Stowe Family YMCA just north of the I-85 bridge.
Gaston County 911. I'm a boater on the Catawba River. Above the I-85 bridge, there's a car that's run off an embankment and there's a body laying there. I don't know if they're alive or not.
The last documented moment of her life was grainy surveillance video of her car driving through the YMCA parking lot. Police sent that video to NASA in Florida, hoping it could be enhanced so they could tell if there was anyone with Ira. They were unable to find evidence. The young woman was abducted and determined she must have met her killer down at the river. It was the next day that investigators confirmed it was Ira's body found on the river banks. And 2 days later, an autopsy report revealed she died of asphyxiation. Police said Ira was found lying next to her car. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation said a bungee cord, a ribbon, and a sweatshirt drawstring were found around her neck. Back 11 years ago, I spoke with those jet skiers who found Ira's body hours after she was last seen.
I knew she was dead, and I knew it was a crime scene. I can visualize her fighting for her life on this riverbank right here until someone, whoever it was, finally killed her.
Just days later, Dennis Lovelace and Brenda Pierce took me back to the river where they found Ira's body. It was emotional for both of them being back at the spot where they made the gruesome discovery. I still remember our conversation, Brenda breaking down into tears.
We came back on the Wednesday after we found Ira's body, and I couldn't stay. It's just really emotional. It's uncomforting. It's eerie.
The two were out to jet ski, a nice way to spend a summer day out on the water, the sun shining. And then
The car was right on the bank right here, and we turned around and came back.
they say the grass around the 20-year-old's body had been beaten down like there'd been a struggle.
That day was so beautiful out here. There wasn't any clouds, and just right there was that's where we found her, and just the sun beaming on her face like that, I will never forget it.
It was well before any suspects emerged in the case.
Just wondering where the perpetrator went, which way did he leave? And when we come by here, it's going to always, just those questions until they're answered are going to be in my mind. And her face is always going to be in my mind. It's going to be on my mind every time I cross by here, being on the water all the time.
A body found on the river, maybe a murder. It was almost unheard of in the small town of Mount Holly.
You don't expect anything like that happening near you.
I was there when police went along the banks of the Catawba River that afternoon.
A grassy area down a huge embankment. To me, that is a concern right there for how did the vehicle get down there to begin with.
And I followed the investigation step by step.
Someone caused her death.
The leads police had right after the crime and the challenges they faced. Plus, as time passed, investigators turned their focus to two fishermen. The evidence police say led to their arrest months after the crime, and my interview with Mark Carver from behind bars.
I don't know why they playing that down, because I didn't do it.
Police were very tight-lipped as they investigated Ira Yarmolenko's death. It wasn't until days after her body was found that they labeled it a murder investigation. I, along with several other reporters, went down to the scene with then Mount Holly Police Chief David Belk. It was when investigators had more questions than answers about the circumstances that led to her killing.
Ira's body was laying right here. Her feet are down at this end, and her head is up where your feet are at right here. So the vehicle is actually sitting right here with the driver's door open and the back door open. Tree stump right there, straight down, is what her vehicle actually hit. And there we do still have some questions about that, whether it was under power when it went down through there. Obviously, when it's sitting at the stump, it is under power because the front wheels are spinning. I'm not going to try to explain why the front wheels were spinning. All we know is that they were spinning. The actual keys to the vehicle were right up in this area here. How she got outside the vehicle, well, we can play the what if. Obviously, I don't know how she ended up in the position that she was. We have taken the vehicle and taken it over to Belmont and stored it in their facilities over there for security, and we have done an inventory inside the vehicle.
Fingerprints?
We did a latent print search as to what's happened with any that they found. I haven't been instructed as to what's happened with those. Mount Holly's, we are a small town. We have limited resources, and all I did was call for extra resources. I made another call to the SBI. I said, can we do some more?
You said you had some pretty good leads. Do you still have them?
Yes. I had a short conversation with the detectives before we came out here, and they're still following up on the leads. We are convinced that someone did that to her. So that's how our investigation is proceeding.
When you say someone did that to her, can you kind of explain someone drove?
Someone caused her death. Now, whether they drove that vehicle down there, I can't tell you that. If they pulled her out of the vehicle, I can't tell you that either. Simply because I do not know. But I know someone caused her death, and that's who we're trying to find.
Who they're trying to find. Well, it would have been 7 long months later. But on December 12, 2008, investigators would announce the arrest of cousins Mark Carver and Neil Cassida. They said they found the men responsible for Ira's murder. But before the arrest, public pressure was mounting. In mid-May, UNC Charlotte announced a reward of $10,000 for information leading to an arrest in Ira's death. And a month later, in June, the governor's office approved an additional $5,000 reward, bringing the total to $15,000. Later that month, We were with Pavel Yarmolenko, Ira's brother, as he drove Interstate 85, stopping to put up flyers hoping to inspire a break in the case.
Will it be a happy day when your sister's killer is caught?
I think so. Yeah, I think it'll be bittersweet, but it'll be better than any other day before.
But another month would pass until July, and Mount Holly Police Department announced new information in the investigation. Police said data from her car's black box indicated someone was sitting in the driver's seat, and the driver's seatbelt was engaged when it went down an embankment. They also said someone started the car at the scene. It was crickets until Carver and Cassida were arrested, and even as they appeared in court for the first time, police and the district attorney hadn't said what led them to charge the men. So what was it that put them behind bars? Cassida took a polygraph test, but records show he passed it. Carver was never offered one. Both men also voluntarily submitted DNA samples. Investigators say that's when they finally had the big lead they were looking for. They found traces of Carver's touch DNA or skin cells outside of Ira's car above the rear driver's side door, and Cassida's touch DNA inside the right passenger window and on the armrest. No fluid, no blood, but police believed it was enough to arrest them. I interviewed Carver from jail. He said he and Cassida were fishing nearby, but never saw Ira.
All right. If you can, first off, talk to us about why police say you're behind Ira.
I don't know why they're saying I done it, because I didn't do it. I didn't even go around the car, didn't even know the car was up there or nothing.
Were you there when this happened?
Yeah, I was fishing down in the hollow.
Were you with Mr. Casada?
No, I don't even know the girl. I've never seen her my whole life.
Were you fishing with your cousin?
Yeah, with my cousin.
And that's Mr. Casada?
No, that's Neil Cassidy.
What's that?
Neil Cassidy.
Okay. If you can, talk to us about how this whole process began, how this thing led from you going fishing to you being behind bars.
Well, we was fishing, and we was down there and we heard a scrape. And the next thing we know, the law and stuff started coming. And they showed up and they said there was a girl up there and stuff, you know. But we didn't know nothing about her being up there. No.
What was your first contact with police after that? So you said you heard the scream, but you didn't know there was
I didn't hear no scream, I heard a scrape.
You heard what, scrape?
Scrape.
Okay. And when you heard that, what did you think?
They were scraping the road.
Did you go over to check and see what was happening?
I just kept fishing.
How did you realize something was going on there?
There's a boy on a jet ski started hollering, calling 911.
And did you call 911?
I didn't have no phone.
How did police come in contact with you? I assume they came in contact with you that day.
Yeah, they come in contact with me. They come through behind the YMCA up through that swamp.
And what did they say to you when they saw you there?
They told me not to move, just stay here, we're looking for a body.
How long did y'all end up talking that day?
Probably about an hour.
Have they ever explained to you what they thought you did, why they believe that you're their man?
They said they had evidence I done it, and I didn't do it. I didn't go around the car, and nowhere near the car, and nothing. I stayed down there where my Jeep was. I didn't go around it.
What kind of evidence did the police say they had?
They said that they had a DNA in the car, of my DNA and Neil's DNA in the car. And I know that's a lie because Neil left, and they couldn't have got no DNA because I wasn't down there. I didn't go around it. I didn't go around the car.
Despite his claims of innocence, Mark Carver went to trial and the state laid out its case. including a bombshell during his interrogation.
I believe the words he used was a little thing or a little girl. He said that she came up to him about right here.
Carver had claimed he'd never seen Ira, but how did he know how tall she was?
Show me about how tall she was on you. Probably about right there.
We're revisiting that video the jury never watched and whether it could have changed the trial's outcome. Cousins Mark Carver and Neil Cassida both maintained their innocence as they prepared to go to trial for murder. Cassida would never have his day in court, though. He died of a heart attack the day before his trial was scheduled in October of 2010. Carver would finally go to trial at the Gaston County Courthouse in March 2011. His attorney at the time told us Carver was looking forward to his day in court to clear his name. But the state painted a picture of a cold-blooded killer that needed to pay for what he did to a young, innocent woman.
Her feet were near the river, underneath some brush, and in closer inspection, she was actually holding some of that brush in her hand.
One of the detectives at the scene took the stand, unsealing the murder weapons, a ribbon taken from a purse in Ira's car, a black drawstring from her sweater.
This is the blue bungee cord from that was removed from Ms. Yarmolenko's neck.
The prosecution said Carver used these items to strangle Ira. The defense argued there was no proof of that because his DNA was not found on any of those.
Mr. Carver didn't do it. There's not enough evidence to let this case go to the jury.
Carver's DNA wasn't there, but an FBI forensic scientist testified that there was a DNA profile from an unknown person on one weapon. The prosecution argued Carver's DNA was washed away.
She was thrown in the river. The river washed away his DNA. That river did not wash away his sins.
The defense said that's absurd.
The state wants to believe that there has been a tsunami from the river that washed it off.
Even though Carver's DNA wasn't found on the murder weapons, the state's experts said DNA evidence showed that he likely touched her car. Prosecutors saying that proved that he lied when he said he was never at the crime scene.
126 million times more likely to be observed from Mark Carver.
The DNA puts this defendant in incredibly close proximity to a recently murdered girl.
And Carver's claim that he never ever seen Ira. A detective testified Carver knew how tall the woman was.
I believe the words he used was a little thing or a little girl. He said that she came up to him about right here.
But the defense argued Carver got that information secondhand and actually said,
I guess I saw it on TV.
I believe so, yes, sir.
Maybe the biggest question in the case is why. The defense proclaimed Carver, a complete stranger, had no reason to murder the UNC Charlotte student.
Why in the world would this man, Mark Carver, kill Irene Yarmolenko?
Even presenting the possibility Ira took her own life. But the prosecution said the two fishermen saw the 20-year-old at the river and took advantage of the situation. They said Carver and Cassida strangled her, then tried to push her car with her inside into the Catawba River.
They murdered this girl, and they want that car and that body in the river where it will not be found.
It only took the jury 5 hours to find Carver guilty of first-degree murder.
The state of North Carolina versus Mark Carver, guilty of first-degree murder.
The judge sentencing him to life behind bars. Ira's older brother couldn't keep silent. He turned to Carver.
I don't know what to say to him.
He thanked the district attorney after leaving the courtroom.
This has been very hard for us, but justice was done here.
A week later, Carver's attorneys filed a motion asking the judge to overturn the jury's verdict, but that motion was denied. When I spoke with one of the jurors right after trial, he said a turning point for him was that Carver knew Ira Yarmolenko's height, but the video of Carver's interrogation may actually raise some questions about that. He sat in a room with investigators for over an hour, answering questions about what he was doing the day Ira's body was found.
So, once again, you didn't see or hear nothing other than the scraping of what you say sounded like somebody scraping the road, but you didn't see nobody scraping the road. You just heard that. I just heard it. You saw some jet skiers and some normal boat traffic, but you didn't talk to them. You never saw the little girl that got killed. You never saw her call. You never heard her call. Did you ever hear her scream for help?
No. I didn't hear her scream.
You didn't hear her scream at all? She didn't make a sound, did she? Whoever got on her quick, didn't they? They got their hands around her throat quick, didn't they? Snuffed her out.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Then that bombshell moment where officials say Carver gave himself away.
Had to be somebody big and strong.
Like so, bigger than her. She was a little bitty thing, wasn't she? How much bigger she weighed?
Probably about
110. How tall do you figure she was? She wasn't real tall, was she?
She wasn't real tall. She wasn't much taller than me.
How tall were you?
About 5'4".
So she wasn't much taller than you?
Not what I seen.
If y'all was standing up looking at each other in the eyes, but would she be looking you in the eyes?
Yeah, about
Show me, stand up, show me about how tall she was on you.
Probably about right there.
Okay.
I guess. And I don't know.
Yeah, I understand.
The detective who testified at trial said Carver called Ira little, but you can hear it's actually the officer who called her little bitty first. That video was never played for jurors. It's just one reason why the North Carolina Center on Actual Innocence says Mark Carver didn't have a proper defense. The group took on his case in 2013. Their team helps provide legal services for inmates who are unrepresented, in financial need, and who have maintained their innocence. The center reviews more than 600 innocence claims from inmates each year. Mark Carver's current attorney, Chris Muma, is the group's executive director. She takes on just 2% of the clients who approach her.
We don't make statements that we believe someone is innocent unless we are really sure. We run a 98% rejection rate on the cases that come to us. And we don't take a case to litigation unless we are sure, 100% sure.
The center's website cites 9 cases where it's helped exonerate people, some serving decades behind bars. The group also lists 3 current cases, including Carver's, with scheduled litigation. After years of fighting to overturn his conviction, a judge ruled Mark Carver deserves a new trial, a victory for his team.
Definitely innocent, 100%.
A blow to investigators, and certainly unsettling for Ira Yarmolenko's family.
They're having to relive the horror. And this is very, very sad.
The reason the judge said Carver wasn't properly defended, and the evidence he called doubtful. The North Carolina Center on Actual Innocence filed a motion for appropriate relief on Mark Carver's behalf. Back in 2016, it cited DNA evidence and investigative flaws in its fight to prove his innocence. An evidentiary hearing was held in April of this year, and the judge on June 5th vacated his conviction and ordered a new trial. The judge's order said bluntly, Mark Carver's trial attorney failed to properly investigate the case before bringing it to trial, and then at trial, failed to present evidence about key factors. Touch DNA was likely the most important. That is, DNA discovered in small amounts, trace cells that can be easily transferred from person to person, place to place. It was a relatively new concept at the time of the trial. It is the only link between Mark Carver and the crime scene. His touch DNA was reportedly found on Ira Yarmolenko's car. Judge C.W. Bragg said Carver's attorney,
he just gave you a fiction.
Brent Ratchford, failed to educate himself on touch DNA before the trial and didn't meet with the SBI Crime Lab analyst and the state's expert witness. He said during the trial, Ratchford didn't present his own evidence about DNA, which violates the American Bar Association standards for criminal justice. The judge said Carver's attorney didn't talk to Carver's family or medical experts about Carver's carpal tunnel syndrome, a condition that can limit the amount of pressure a person can apply with his hands. The judge said that would have raised doubt about Carver's ability to strangle a young, healthy, and seemingly fit Ms. Yarmolenko. He said the defense team also failed to consider Neil Cassiter's heart problems that may have made it hard for him to help in the murder. The judge said Carver's attorney also failed to consider his limited IQ. His current attorney said he has the IQ of a child.
Whoever got on her quick,
and that made him very susceptible to suggestions during the interview with police. The judge said the defense team was granted money for a psychological evaluation but didn't get one, and didn't interview Carver's psychiatrist, the same doctor that Carver met with the morning that Ira Yarmolenko was killed.
As I respect the judge, I think the judge is wrong. Because what the judge never addressed was how that would have changed things.
The judge mentioned how Carver's trial attorneys didn't use his medical records. The North Carolina Center on Actual Innocence said several doctors found Carver had greatly decreased grip strength and that he could not hold a doctor's pen without dropping it. Could these hands strangle someone? Carver mentioned his carpal tunnel syndrome and tendinitis in his arms several times during his 2008 interrogation.
And you're not working now, are you? At this age?
Yeah.
But you worked in the mill, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, till I got crippled.
How are you crippled?
I got carpal tunnel, and tendinitis in my elbows.
According to medical records, Carver has had carpal tunnel syndrome since at least 1998. And another key flaw in the original trial, according to the judge, was to touch DNA evidence. In 2008, it was cutting-edge forensic science. The technique allows for analysis of skin cells left behind after merely touching an object. Touch DNA does not involve any blood or bodily fluids, which can directly link a person to a crime scene. Critics argue it only requires a small amount of DNA that can be easily transferred. Carver's case was the first in North Carolina where touch DNA evidence was considered by an appellate court. In a 2-to-1 ruling in 2012, the court upheld Carver's conviction, citing the DNA and his continued claims that he'd never been near Era's car as sufficient to establish that the DNA could only have been left at the time the offense was committed. But in a dissenting opinion, Justice Robert Hunter Jr. said Carver's conviction should be overturned because touch DNA testing is relatively new and not as accurate as blood or saliva DNA testing. In 2013, North Carolina Supreme Court affirmed the lower court's ruling upholding Carver's conviction. The state's high court did not comment on touch DNA. Not long before Carver's trial, the State Bureau of Investigation's crime lab came under fire after a government-ordered review raised serious questions about its procedures. The report by 2 former FBI officials found the SBI crime lab left out, overstated, or falsely reported blood evidence in about 200 criminal cases. They reviewed the cases over a 16-year period from 1987 to 2003 and said in some situations, SBI agents left out information that may have helped the defense. It's worth noting that the 2008 murder of Era Yarmolenko was not within the scope of the review, but the SBI crime lab did undergo a series of changes after the 2010 report. The district attorney said the judge's decision to vacate the conviction was wrong, and even if Carver's attorneys had presented evidence, he still would have been convicted of murder.
What the judge never addressed was how that would have changed things.
But one juror from back then said things could have been different.
I think I'm wrong.
My exclusive interview with the man who now says he may have helped send an innocent man to prison. John Little sat in the courtroom in 2011 trying to make up his mind about whether Mark Carver murdered Era Yarmolenko. He said he was only one of 2 jurors back then who wasn't immediately sure Carver was guilty. Little spoke exclusively to me about how he now thinks he helped send an innocent man to prison.
I just sent a man away for the rest of his life.
Listen closely, because you will rarely hear a juror say what John Little says about the man he helped to send to prison on a life sentence.
I think he needs to be freed.
You feel convinced of his innocence?
I do.
He calls his vote to convict Mark Carver of murder a mistake.
And if I can say it right for my mistake.
John Little sat on the jury in 2011.
She was thrown in the river.
Patiently listening to prosecutors explain why they say Mark Carver and Neil Cassida killed Era Yarmolenko. Little had trouble with their argument.
Why would this guy go back over there and fish with his cousin if he just killed somebody, shoved him down to the lake, and go back over there fishing?
Blue bungee cord.
His mind changed when he heard a detective explain how Carver knew Era's height, though Carver claimed he never met her.
He said that she came up to him about right here.
Little said the jurors wanted to hear from Carver himself.
They don't have any evidence to that.
But the defense team didn't call Carver and didn't put up evidence.
We wanted it. Everybody in the jury room did say that.
He told me despite that, once deliberations began, some jurors were convinced that they had heard enough.
They were just ready to get it done, get it over with, and let's get out. No, we're not doing that. We're gonna talk about this because I'm not ready to convict this man. They were kind of mad because I wasn't turning.
He and only one other juror originally voted not guilty. They eventually relented.
And this guy's going away for the rest of his life.
Right.
You know, and it's a decision that I made.
Little said later he learned about things he didn't hear at trial. Police touching the car where Carver's DNA was reportedly found. The DNA wasn't tested until months after the discovery of the body.
I think I'm wrong.
Tell the truth about how tall she was.
Then in April, he saw this police interview of Mark Carver, and he believed he heard the investigator coaching Carver on the victim's height.
I would have never, ever convicted him had I seen what I seen in April.
Little wrote his concerns in an affidavit, hoping the world would know that he had a change of heart and would change his vote on a verdict if he could.
Does it mean that much? Is it that deep?
Well, I wasn't given enough information to make a formative decision. I'm gonna say it. I'm really pissed that we didn't get all the information because, you know, that's just wrong. That's wrong.
The entire case looks different to him now.
It was botched from the get-go. They was just looking for somebody to convict. And Mr. Carver was unfortunately fishing that day.
Little says his remorse doesn't cancel out his concerns for Ira Yarmolenko, a 20-year-old found dead so far from home and gone way too soon.
And every time I go across that lake, I do think about that girl. You know, give the Yarmolenkos justice, but give Mark Carver justice.
In a perfect world, what makes this situation right?
Free the man and find the correct killer.
The jury deliberated for 5 hours before handing down a guilty verdict for first-degree murder back in 2011. The judge sentenced Carver to life in prison, where he stayed until he was released on June the 11th, 2019. Now, in the eyes of the law, he is innocent until proven guilty. So where do we go from here? It's important to remember this case is all about justice for Ira Yarmolenko, the 20-year-old college student who was taken from her family and her friends too soon. Ira moved to America from the Ukraine when she was just 7 years old. Loved ones described the young woman as a musician, a photographer, and a poet.
I'm a choir. I'm a lover of bodies and beauty. I'm a fighter. I'm a justice and justice.
Family members said she loved nature and being outdoors. They said she was a trusting and outgoing person. Her brother Pavel said the search for her killer tormented the family as they wanted and waited, hoping for justice. We spoke to them during the heartbreaking time.
I only hope that police can find this person responsible for that.
I think it would be a disgrace to her name to not be hopeful that people can make a positive influence and that we can sort of move forward from this.
And it appeared justice came when a jury convicted Mark Carver of Ira's murder, and a judge sent him to prison for the rest of his life. But that closure has now been ripped away from them. I contacted Ira's brother Pavel after Carver's conviction was overturned. He didn't want to comment on the case. The Catawba River looks serene tonight, but it holds memories of a heinous crime and gruesome discovery. Ira Yarmolenko's body was found along the banks of this river more than 11 years ago, and to this day, questions about her murder have been mounting. Did investigators find her killers, or did they build their case against a man with questionable evidence? Mark Carver may be at home and out of prison, but it's not over. A new trial could bring to light new evidence to either prove his guilt or his innocence. But one thing is for sure, the 20-year-old college student who lost her life here on the banks of this river deserves justice. Thanks for joining us for True Crime Carolinas, the Mark Carver case.
They was just looking for somebody to convict. And Mr. Carver was unfortunately fishing that day.
I feel like it was a just verdict. I feel like it was the only verdict we could have arrived at.
What trial were you at? Because the evidence was not there.
If you look at the pictures of Mark before he went to prison and the pictures of Mark now, you see a person who aged a lot, who is showing signs of the trauma he went through.
It's my daughter's graduating, Emma and them graduating, and Mary. I miss my family. I missed out on a lot of their birthdays and stuff.
I think the person who did this to Ira knew her because it was a very personal murder.
That day it was so beautiful out here. There wasn't any clouds, and just right there was that's where we found her, and just the sun beaming on her face like that, I will never forget it.
Ask us girls disguised as women, with hearts full of longing, with bellies full of indecision. What is life worth to you? What is time worth to you?